Hello, everyone. We are really pleased to have with us Mr. Lorenzo Garfano. He's a business leader with 20 years of international experience and an all-round blend of, commercial, operational, and technical skills, which he has developed through his corporate consulting and experience through startups. He's passionate about making a positive impact on people and the environment through innovation. He thrives on making things happen from idea to strategy to action. In his words, he has succeeded and failed, but has never given up. He's a co founder at Zilva. He previously headed sales, marketing, and customer experience at EF Education First, in which he drove two-digit sales growth in Europe and Asia, doubled the NPS across 50 campuses, and inspired teams in 5 continents to turn every student experience into a wow. Before that, he has worked in consulting in the automotive sector at GM-Fiat and in a tech startup. So before we move on to the interview with Mr. Lorenzo, just a couple of lines on, or a little word on the company that he has co-founded, which is Zilva Global, because it's important to know the initiative that he is associated with. So Zilva is a global marketplace for regenerative forest investments. Their platform offers a portfolio of early stage forestry projects across the world. They help businesses source, screen, and fund forests to achieve their climate, nature, and social impact goals. Their solution provides transparency, ease, and innovation to mobilize capital on a global scale for a forest and nature positive future. With their proprietary assessment methodology, Zilva Grade, they help organizations invest with confidence and project developers get funding. Zilva's mission to enable and scale more forests than any of us have ever seen and unleash their full value for the planet. They do this by creating the world market leader in regenerative early stage forest investments. Over to Lorenzo to give us a little more about Zilva, because we've really been, excited about what the company does.
Thank you, Sucharita. I'm absolutely excited, thrilled to be here. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to present Xilva and talk a little bit about my experience in this sector and with this venture. It's an honor to be speaking in front of the students and faculties of the Rushford Business School, and I am absolutely open to any questions that you may want to ask now and also following this session. And thanks a lot also to Anne for the opportunity to hosting this conversation virtually and supporting this. Thanks a lot. Yes. Thank you for the introduction. It's very humbling, and maybe the first thing to say is that I'm also a relatively new entrepreneur. So the journey with Zilva started a year and a half ago, and it came from a strong calling for me and for my co-founders. From personal experiences and from the news that come in more and more worrying about the state of the affairs in terms of nature loss and climate change. So about, just to give you a brief intro how it happened. It's 4 co-founders, so I'm one of them, and we all share a strong sense of purpose and the need to make an impact. And we decided to do that through something that is relatively not usually considered as related to business, and that's through forests. And these came from the notion of one of my co-founders, Jamie, who's worked for 3 decades in the sector for NGOs, for companies, for organizations like Rainforest Alliance and WWF. The notion that forests are today an undervalued asset. So we as humanity rely a lot on forests and the ecosystem services that they produce, but we do not fully gauge and assess and use the sort of the price value that they may bring. So it's basically an asset where we do not invest with the same mindset of other resources that we use in our economies, in our value chains. But this is changing very quickly and very radically. And so more and more businesses, but also the public sector, is realizing that this requires a more structured approach and financing, because of course, especially in order to counter the market forces that have led many forested area to be degraded and deforested. And we of course know many cases in Indonesia or in the Congo Basin or in the Amazon. So we need to find a way to create positive incentives for monies to flow into forestry to keep that as an asset that can grow and thrive in the future. Sorry, very long intro.
we wanted to know because it's very important, because the initiative itself is so different. We do come across a lot of initiatives that are happening across the world, but then you're taking an initiative at a global scale. So it's not just that you're kind of touching literally. When I was going through your website, you're practically touching every continent. And yeah, so I mean, while we've studied in school and otherwise, we've always been taught that forests are our most precious resources. However, having said so, we have not left any stone unturned to degrade them. Lumbering and taking wood, I mean, whatever, trees, felling trees, without necessarily doing afforestation. And without the basic understanding that a tree which is felled was probably 15, 20, 25 years old. So it will take a sapling that many years to grow to become that tree, and to substitute what has been taken today. So just wanted to know, how did this idea come to you all? Because it's a very, very novel idea. How did it come to you?
Yeah, it came from the realization, from the notion that there's a lot of commitments and pledges and finances made available and committed for the restoration and the protection of nature, and especially of forests. And at the same time, there's a lot of initiatives on the ground, project developers, eco-entrepreneurs that have a strong drive and purpose and passion to generate and develop projects that actually do exactly that: restore, protect natural ecosystems. And somehow there's a lot of friction in between. So there's no as easy flow of money. And then we realized also of information, which is another key valuable asset in the process to actually enable those projects. And so the money stays basically on the table, and the projects do not have the opportunity to grow and to scale as much as they could with the appropriate financing. And so the idea came from looking at other examples of industries that have been disrupted and grown massively thanks to the deployment of innovation, and especially the digital innovation. And so the question for us was, can we replicate the same success stories that have, for example, made today banking or transportation or food distribution so much more efficient and so much more large at scale? Can we apply and replicate the same model to forestry? And of course, we don't know the answer yet. We are still a young startup. We have many successes in our year and a half of operation, but it's still a very, very nascent sector. And but we believe that it's a key one. It's a very crucial one where we need to succeed in order for all of us to have a brighter future. And I also want to mention, you asked me about the global scope. This is very true. Well, it's true because on one end, the pressure on extractive practices of towards nature and forest in particular tend to be distributed, or they tend to be in the south of the world, in the tropical belt. So we talk about South America, we talk about Africa, we talk about Southeast Asia. So it's a very distributed region of the world, and at the same time, that pressure mostly comes from economic activity that is originated in the north of the world, so especially North America and in Europe. And so, as a matter of fact, in order to facilitate an easier, a more trustworthy flow of finances from one to the other, as a matter of fact, we have to cover the whole global span.
Right, right. Yes, I mean, that's what normally when students of environmental management are taught about the north-south divide. So, which is true, you know, where there's a lot of industrialization in the northern part of the hemisphere from using resources from the southern part of the hemisphere. So it's not just about the forests that get impacted, but also the communities that are dependent on the forests that also get impacted in the process. Right. So yeah, sorry.
Yeah, you touched on upon a very, very important point, and the point that is also at the core of what we do. Without a deep involvement of the local communities, of the people that actually live and can thrive or need to make also a livelihoods from the use of the resources, it's absolutely, we've learned by experience now that it's absolutely paramount to have that involvement early on. So a project that is designed in some ivory tower from far away can be on paper absolutely functional, but then it really requires the engagement and the support of the people that are on the ground. And this means also that the impact is basically never compartmentalized. So we think about climate, then we think about nature, then we think about social. The truth is, it only happens in a holistic way when an intervention, when a project is actually covering all aspects, because that's what really will make a project successful.
Right. So,
right, Mr.
Yes, sorry.
Yes, sorry, Mr. Lorenzo. Thank you very much. When I first come in your website, my first impression is, wow, this is brilliant ideas, because the climate change is the global externality. And you use the taking advantage of digital platform to solve the global problem, to address in everywhere in the world within a click of mouse. That's a brilliant idea. My question is, how you track the progress of your project? Do you use satellite to track the progress of tree planting, or or you use the local people, to trust on the local people to provide you the status report on the progress of the project?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Thank you, and also thank you for the kind words and endorsement on the digital model. To answer your question, remote sensing and satellite imagery and all the digital technologies for the MRV of the project is a sector in itself that is growing very fast. So as a company, as an organization, Xilva does not develop our own technology in this sense. So we work with partners that are very good at what they do, and definitely the ability to monitor from the distance through first-hand data input is very important. It's everybody knows, or if at all involved in sustainability topics nowadays, there's a very growing debate nowadays following articles, investigative articles on The Guardian about the legitimacy of certain methodologies that actually allow these projects to create revenues through the sale of carbon offsets. That's an example of a transition that is happening nowadays. And right. There's no perfect solution yet, but all of this is really contributing to to build a solution as we go. And so specifically to answer your question, yes, we do rely on third-party partners for the use of technology that allow to complement what we already do directly with the project, but also a lot is down to the relationship that we build with the project developers, proponents, and managers on the ground. What we see is that transparency is a very strong currency. Not always is there, and this is one of the reasons that we believe digital can introduce the type of welcome disruption that will open up the sector. And so what we really focus a lot on is on assessing and fostering a higher level of transparency. And that's sort of channeled into, for example, our own methodology for the appraisal of projects, the Zilva grade. Where we rely on a variety of third-party sources, public registries, web search, and so on, in order to cross-reference the information that is available about projects and make sure that if the information is incomplete or it looks inconsistent, that we bring it up. And for us, it's very important to actually provide the feedback to the project developer as well. They may be not aware that this is a criticality, and for example, that this is also preventing potential investors to see the project as an appealing one to fund. And therefore, with this feedback, they are able to improve and to increase the chances to get the funding that they need.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So that's what, I was kind of moving on to that, how do you scope these projects? So, for example, there are multiple forests across the world that, require attention. So how do you prioritize it? Which, would get your attention before the other?
Yes. Originally, when we set out to work on this topic, we had a list of about 1,000 forestry projects in our top of the funnel. So basically, the projects we knew of, and we keep progressively working with. So it's many of them. We need to of course, apply some criteria. And so we partially rely on inbound flow of requests. So project proponents, eco-entrepreneurs, or organizations that hear about us, and they would like to get in touch and potentially work with us. But also we are quite proactive in selecting from our experience understanding of the projects out there where we should what is really giving us a degree of reliability and credibility and robustness that points to a high potential for the project to succeed. And that's how we use the Xilva grade also. It's organized as a three-step process. So there's a first step, which is a pre-screening, through which you can imagine we analyze a large number of projects, but only the projects that have the fundamentals in check, and where we see that there's a potential for moving forward, we pass them over to the next stage, which is screening, where we also go a little deeper in the evaluation of key information. And the projects that make it through the screening, we finally assess them more deeply through our grading system. And the output of this process is twofold: is feedback for the project. So we also inform them about whether we see weak points, areas for improvement that they may want to pick up in order to increase their chances to be successful. And at the same time, we share this information with potential investors and corporate buyers that use the information to make a decision on whether this is a project that they want to support and fund.
Right. So, which means, there are multiple parties involved in the final. So, of course, there is the criticality of the situation. Some forests may be highly critical and would require this kind of regeneration activity. Some forests probably get adopted because of the corporates who want, you to probably work on those particular forests. So they too have a say in the forests that are being worked upon. So while you're working with the forest, have you ever faced some sort of what would I say, a backlash from the local communities that, why have you come and, with the thought that, now you're taking our earnings away, or our sources of living. And what is it that you're here from? Because very often what happens is there could be a little bit of a divide. Emotionally, academically, through their knowledge, thoughts, etc. So how do you counter that?
So definitely, there have been cases, not in our history, but reported on the news by outlets, of projects that, as you say, have turned out to be not fully mindful of the will or the benefit of the local populations, and we strive to avoid that as a top priority. So typically, the most successful projects even start from the initiative of local communities, and this is an example. So you asked me in preparation of this meeting to tell you about a project that has been very successful, and so one of them, which I'd love to share about, is a project that has had a sort of an entrepreneur that has facilitated the process of engagement with local farmers. I'm talking about an area in Indonesia and in Sumatra, where different market forces and exploitation of the land for monocultures had impoverished and depleted the land. And through this coordinated effort of engagement with local farmers, of construction of a business model that would leverage multiple revenue streams for them. So with the planting of trees, with the growth of trees in an agroforestry landscape context, where the local farmers would actually, we are today benefiting from increased yields on the production of fruits and non-timber forest products that they can sell on the market, and at the same time, the revenues generated through the carbon certification. So this is an intervention that is proven to have a positive climate impact by sequestering carbon from the atmosphere, storing it in the biomass. This is today generating additional revenues through the sale of carbon offsets, and therefore the local population can enjoy an increased level of livelihoods. And this is the type of project that will not fail, because it's almost like in a virtuous cycle. There's a win-win situation for everyone involved.
Right.
Yeah, I hope I answered your question.
Yes, you did. So I also understand that this is probably one of the parameters that you also look at as to how the project is going to support the local people and how it's going to be beneficial for them, and therefore they adapt and adopt, your methodologies of regeneration there. Wonderful, right?
I also want to clarify. We as Xilva do not develop the projects ourselves. So we act as a marketplace, as a platform where, on one end, businesses, companies, impact investors, sometimes development finance institutions look at and source projects that they want to support and invest into. And on the other side, we have organizations on the ground. Sometimes they are NGOs, sometimes they are cooperatives and consortia of local farmers. Sometimes there are eco-entrepreneurs, so people that want to apply sort of the market model and even the startup idea of building a project on the development of a natural asset. And we support them through giving them market access, financing, and the expert feedback that I mentioned. But at the end of the day, they run the project, and if it's the case, they may acquire the rights to the land. Not everywhere that's a necessary component. In some cases, the land is sort of the legal framework in the jurisdiction does not allow for the transfer ownership of the land. It can be other types of interventions, for example, with leasing or renting. And this means also that the concern about land grabbing or new colonialism from organizations going and buying swathes of land to use for their sort of mitigation of nature and climate impact is avoided. And we definitely believe that this should be avoided. There should be a full involvement, multi-stakeholder process where we make sure that extremes like these do not happen.
Right. So any specific industries where you feel you receive more funding from amongst the various industries that we have across the globe? Any ones that you...
It is quite interesting. We see a very strong surge, but also in absolute terms, of interest in the real estate sector.
Okay.
So real estate developers, real estate managers, sometimes also fund managers that in the property sector, and so we see quite some build up of interest there. Right. And other than that, I think there's definitely a lot happening in the land use sector. So all the companies that produce food and produce textile. So many of the fashion brands are at the forefront of initiatives setting up funds to invest into forestry projects that can blend into their value chains in a way that is also respectful of the environment and producing positive impact. Because traditionally those supply chains have always had a negative net impact on the ecosystems, with plantations, with the use of non-native species. So many of these companies are now realizing the intrinsic risks of pursuing such an economic model, and taking very active role in pooling funds and investing them, deploying them into the conservation and restoration of natural ecosystems.
Right, right. And these projects, do they assign carbon credits to the industries that fund these kind of projects? Because, like, at one hand, if they aren't necessarily completely green, they make up for that inability by creating, or contributing towards the planet in some other way. So, do they receive any such credits for their activities?
So carbon compensation is one of the levers that today provides the financing opportunity. So companies investing and projects getting funding. And this happens through the mechanism of voluntary carbon markets, mostly in the nature base. So in the natural technology of carbon sequestration. So if we don't think about other types of technologies that have been very prominent in the past, we see these as a very welcome, although transitional measure, because as you say, we need to rethink many of the economic models that we have been relying on for decades. And when we hear about decarbonization, that means mainly that industries that are heavy polluters need to rethink and innovate their value chains in order to inherently reduce the emissions in their supply chains. But transitionally, while those technologies are developed and we, for example, find a new, better way to produce concrete or to generate energy, which today are huge sources of carbon emissions, in the transition, we also need those companies that today are benefiting from those processes that are polluting the environment to contribute to measures that limit their net impact while they progress on their decarbonization journey. So we do see these as rather controversial because there's a lot of negative also coverage. The Guardian's article, previous episodes in sort of on the same note, which penalize the companies that are trying, maybe in a not perfect way, to take action and use the existing mechanism that we have, like the voluntary carbon market. Unfortunately, this does not make it, so does not create a positive incentive for the vast majority of companies that are not doing anything. So it's today a bit of a tricky situation where if you stay a bit on the side, you can somehow get by, but if you try to do something, you are more exposed to criticisms and of course this is not helping the process of funding projects that can actually protect the environment and regenerate ecosystems.
I think it's great because sustainability is the progress. It's not the perfection. So the company they choose, ranging from the doing less bad first and becoming more good in the future. So we are in the quasi state of sustainability. It's a progress. It's a progress. So the controversies are there, but I'm happy to see company to join, even for the carbon offsets. That's good for every stakeholder, for the company, for the local, for the business, and for the environment.
Thank you. Very well said. I totally agree. I just want to emphasize that. This is of course our small portion of contribution to the larger challenge, but we see the protection, the restoration, the regeneration of forests as our end game. And today, one of the levers that can support that effort is the carbon offsetting. Tomorrow, we will see more happening in terms of biodiversity enhancement.
Yes.
We already see a lot of initiatives, now together with the COP 26, we have a COP 15, which focuses on the biodiversity topic. Today, there's very little system or mechanism in place to reward and incentivize biodiversity enhancement, but we are very hopeful that a similar setup, a similar set of policies and incentives will be created so that it will actually be an economic opportunity to invest into projects that are very positive to the support of biodiversity. And when that happens, we will be there, and we will be very happy to transition from the carbon level towards the biodiversity level. And also, I would like to mention that it's not just about carbon. There are companies and organizations that are already taking commitments, financial commitments for fulfilling a nature positive claim. So companies that say, we are aware that historically our supply chains, we have generated a certain footprint on the planet, a certain environmental footprint, and we want to make that right by now giving back and investing in projects, whether there's carbon or not, but in projects that restore ecosystems and generate ecosystems, increase biodiversity, because that's anyway is needed, and everybody benefits from that.
Right, right. No, I totally agree with Anne, because, while an offset at any level is great,
Yeah, I agree. Yes.
whatever small quantity that is happening is a step towards sustainability. Yes, totally. Right.
It's better than doing nothing.
Yes, yes.
But we're very well aware that it's not a long-term solution, it's a temporary solution, and the end game is to reduce and decarbonize, not to pay someone else to do that.
Yeah.
Well, it's a voluntary action. It's not obligation yet, so it's good voluntary.
It's true, it is voluntary, but we also see that the pressure of public opinion, buyers, shareholders, investors is mounting.
Right.
So it may be not a legally binding requirement for companies, and it's actually becoming more and more. There's, for example, recent regulation passed in Europe and in the US that actually go in the direction of clearly directing business towards practices that reduce deforestation, that limit emissions. But as you say, it's for many businesses and companies, this is a voluntary effort. Of course, there's a return in terms of image or reputation, perhaps customer loyalty and cost of capital. But I'm very mindful and appreciative of businesses that put that at the front of their strategies going forward.
That's what I mean. If everybody could have a different strategic reason for associating themselves. I mean, for somebody, it could be of PR value. For somebody, it could really mean the need to give back, having established themselves on the basis of the resources that they have taken from the earth. So, without taking a lot of your time, just wanted to hear about one project, which has been very successful, and till date is also, probably reaping better results than what you had expected.
Absolutely, I'd love to do that. Actually, I prepared also, if I may share here in the Zoom as well. Is it something that we can do? Okay, so I can share that with you, and so you're very welcome to go, and it's available on a platform where a lot of forestry projects are searchable and visible. So let me just make sure that I do the right thing. All right. Yes, I think you can see my screen.
Yes, yes.
Yes, yes.
So this is the project that I mentioned before. It started as a small scale intervention with the progressive inclusion of more and more local farmers. It's a program that relies on food, so it's agroforestry as the core activity, but also relies on carbon, the sale of carbon certificates, because this intervention actually is around replanting of degraded land. So land that was unproductive, that was exploited for many years of misuse, and so it wasn't bringing any value to the local community, but also was basically unfertile. And through this intervention, with external funding and also with the sale of the carbon credits, the local communities have been able to reinstate a very productive cycle of production. I should say it's very nature friendly. It's an assisted natural regeneration, where basically you let nature do their course and follow its natural development, and these practices are incorporated in activities that are generating economic opportunities for the local farmers. So as you can see, it's not a huge project. It's, by the way, it's a project that we have not initiated. So we are much younger as an organization than the organization that has funded and initiated this project. But just to mention that, so to share the impact that this has created. So we're talking about 165 hectares, which is not a huge extension of land, but the impact is quite remarkable. 1,600 people, 500 families that have been lifted in their economic in livelihoods and economic enablement, and of course it's something that is there in the long term. It's a project that sustains itself, so does not require future external sources of funding to be kept alive, which is a bit the tricky part with traditional conservation initiatives that are, for example, publicly funded or that have a philanthropic contribution, because those are not self-sustaining. So sustainability, we use the term in many ways right nowadays, and you also I think it's something that you pointed in one of our previous exchanges. What is sustainable? Sustainable means that it needs to sustain itself also financially, and there's amazing conservation projects that are funded by governments and NGOs out there, which we very much support. But we are also aware these are projects that once the funding ends for any reason, then this puts a very strong pressure on the detriment of the project. While when a project has an embedded self-sustaining economic cycle, this also means that the project will be there for many years to come. I don't know if I answered your question. I'm happy to walk you a little more through. What I would invite your students also is to perhaps explore the project on this platform. It's called Explorerland. There's tons of beautiful stories as well, very detailed reports on the interventions that have happened on the ground, photos, and this is a very inspiring place to start for anyone who is interested in the topic.
Absolutely, because this is sustainability in all its forms. So people are looking after the land, which was not really how it was, got regenerated, and now the people and the land together are looking after themselves. So,
absolutely.
No, I'm sure, because yes, I mean, while we all need to be optimistic about it, it's just that you are meeting both sides of the people. The beneficiaries are, of course, there, and the people who are, I mean, the very fact that they are involving themselves in this kind of a project is because of the self-awareness. It's not largely, I mean, yes, of course, there have been a lot of, one would say, I mean, the kind of pressures that you're talking about, when the market forces or there's a lot of public outcry about situations in the across the world, that creates more pressure than any legal system. Because legal systems, there's always a possibility to come up with a loophole. Whereas, when people wouldn't allow that to happen, uh, legal system or no legal system, it's bound to take the right course. So that's very, very heartening to hear, because, I wanted to ask this of you because you're there in the front, connecting with so many, a variety of people, and you would know exactly at the ground what's happening. Right. This was really, wonderful knowing that all this is happening. We would request you for an engagement on a much larger scale. We would take a little more of your time, not a little more, maybe a lot more of your time, to be able to interact with, more of the students, the learners that we have at Rushford Business School. So on the outset, thank you so much, Lorenzo. I know I have, taken a lot of your time. Both me and Anne have taken a lot of your time, but we've learned a lot. We've got an insight into what, not just what you're doing as a business, as a company, but also how in the macro environment things are working. So that's it was really, really heartening to know that yes, things are going in the right direction, and there is hope for all of us in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, and thank you, sister. It's been a pleasure. Really, really thrilled to be able to share what we have learned along the way. I'm certainly not an expert, but I'm passionate about the topic, and I would very much welcome future engagements and
Thank
answering
you.
questions that your students may have. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you. I
so
saved
much.
some question for the future talks.
Right. Thank you, Anne. Thank you so
Thank
much for
you.
your
Thank you,
time as well.
Mr.
Right?
Lazo.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. Thank you.
Bye.